Hey everybody, so we are here with another viewer, Remley, as you know him on YouTube. His name is Jeff. He is a truck driver, so we finally caught up to each other. We've tried before, and you're in Salt Lake City now, but your home base is down in Alabama, which is awesome.
That's great.
So he has brought 3 questions for me today, so why don't we go with your first question?
All right. Do you ever get tired of answering the same questions?
Great question. Sometimes I do. It's, I'll have a video where somebody has posted it again and I'm like, gosh, do I really have to type this again? There's days I will, if I have a video just answering that one question, I'll just put the link to the video rather than explaining. It's kind of what I do, so I can't get too agitated by it because I'm here to educate, and someone may be just viewing for the first time and that's their number one question. So they just post it and they haven't found the answer in any other video yet. So sometimes I have to just have grace and give an answer and, or give a little something or direct them to another video. But yeah, sometimes I do. Sometimes it's old. It's like, oh, why do we do this? But if I keep educating, it's doing some good. I just engaged with a conversation with some funeral directors the other day online, and one of them was using the term ash. Well, several of them used the term ashes, and they said, well, that's what people say, so that's what we use. And I said, but if you respond with cremated remains, that will teach the consumer that not to use ashes, like they're, digging out the fire pit or something. So, it's constantly trying to educate because there is so much bad information that sometimes you just have to take the time to give the right information, even if I've answered it 5 million times. And it's funny because the questions that get asked do go in different spurts. At one time it was, how do you embalm a pregnant lady? And I got so many questions on that in one little period of time. And then it was, how long till somebody decomposes? And right now it's, how do you have to embalm somebody before they're cremated? So it's funny how you go through these cycles where people have something on their mind. And I think it really depends on the media and what's being talked about. And, right now, cremation is this big word out there in the media when we're talking about the COVID-19 patients. And so I think that stirs specific questions, and yep, I have to answer it a lot, but it gets the point across, I guess.
Oh, I'm glad you do. It still makes for good content.
Good. Sorry, I got up and I just got the girls. So I read a thing yesterday, like, have fun with your children right now because this is a crazy time. So they're eating ice cream right now for breakfast. And so I gave them ice cream, came in to do video. Now I'm drinking my coffee. So I got to caffeinate up here.
Oh, another feeling.
So what's your number 2?
Okay. I once had the opportunity to visit a crematory and funeral home, and the funeral director was nice enough to walk me around the back room and explain a lot of the process. And he showed me the retort, and he showed me the bucket that he kept all the hip joints and things like that from the cremains. Because the family never wants those back. But what do you do when the bucket gets full? Do you just take it down to the salvage yard and scrap it, or what?
No, it's a great question, and that used to be the case. It used to be kind of throw it out, but recycling is now the main thing that a lot of crematories are doing. So there are now recycling processing plants that are doing this more and more frequently, and they set up really cool programs. So they give you the bucket, you fill it up. When it's full, it gets picked up or sent to the recycling place. And then the money from recycling, kind of like, scrapping metal, the money from that, then you choose an organization as a funeral home. I mean, you can keep the proceeds yourself, but a lot of funeral homes are choosing an organization each year that they donate all that money to in their community. So that money from recycling all those, pieces and parts goes to a community organization. That didn't used to be how it was. You did used to just throw it out because there was nothing to do with it. But now they have said, yes, it's okay. We can recycle this material and we can do good with it. And so, that's kind of passed on. There's a place in Chicago, and I spoke to them at NFDA, and I want to get there to do a tour. Lockdown is, hindering this, but to show everybody kind of how that process works and what good can be done from that. Once in a while, I do get questions that people say, I want to keep such and such when so-and-so dies. So, it depends on the state if there's legalities or whatnot, but yeah, it is always interesting what people do and what they want to do. So
Nice.
yeah, good question though.
And another question derived from that experience, they had a lady in their care that was elderly and had died, say, around a year and a half ago. And I suppose she wasn't technically unclaimed. She'd been there in their cooler for around a year and a half. Yet they'd been in contact with the next of kin, and the family had called them and just kept kicking the can down the road and not paying. And the funeral director had gotten so frustrated. He's like, look, man, I'll do the cremation below cost,
Yeah.
yada, 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 make me, make payments. Let's work something out.
Something, yeah.
Yeah. What do you do in cases like that? I mean, they're not exactly unclaimed. Do you contact the state? Do you just keep waiting?
So
What happens?
a lot of places have something in place now for unclaimed individuals. So like in our area, we would call the medical examiner, and it kind of goes into their hands because it's a deceased that nobody has the authorization to care for. And so we go to them, they will go down then the process of trying to contact next of kin, seeing if they can get any resolve. Then they look at assets and see if there's any assets to bury this person. If the person was on state aid, if they were a veteran, trying to see financially where we're at and just logistically with authorization where we're at with this individual. And then they find a funeral home to care for them. If they're already in your care, then you will probably in the end care for them, but it's going to be at a much, discounted rate. If not, you are paying for caring for them. So funeral homes do a lot of this kind of stuff that you don't realize, and it just gets absorbed. It's written off as bad debt, or, we just alter whatever. But there's a lot of individuals that homeless and, unclaimed or indigent. Like near me, there's a veterans home, and it is all like kind of low income for the most part veterans that are there. So everybody that dies there usually is, kind of given a low income burial. They have their own little cemetery. And so some of that, when you come out of that home, we do what we do for very minimal costs. And the medical examiner and whoever's in charge tries to rotate around and have different funeral homes. Or if one funeral home says, we'll handle them all, we'll be your one main person, and we'll set up some kind of a system. So it really just depends on the area and what they do. I only know kind of what happens around here within that system, but I am going to logically assume that's going to be the same case in most parts of the country. Because it's happening more and more. I mean, can you imagine? Look at New York City. Like Hart's Island is for unclaimed individuals. And they typically do about 25 burials there a week. And right now they're doing, 200 and some a week during the kind of height of the COVID epidemic. Because if you think you've got closely populated groups of people in the homeless community, or people that are, impoverished, and they group together. And then if one of them gets sick, they're all going to get sick. A lot of them have health problems because they're not getting good medical care at that point. And so if one of them got the virus, a lot of them did, which is why the increase of burials at Hart Island, because there's all these unclaimed individuals that they have to store for so long and then send up to Hart Island for burial. So that's part of some of why that increase on Hart Island was so large, is because you have this certain population that had a spike in the virus as well. And they all have to be stored for a certain period of time, hence the trucks. And then they all have to, there's, part of the process is very easily explained, and it's not like irrational and crazy like a lot of people make it out to be. But that's kind of some of the process. But each of those people have to be buried at expense of the state, at expense of the city, at expense of the county, whoever's paying for it. they're paying for it. It's, not the individual or the family. If they're unclaimed, they're unclaimed. There's no family. We do get sometimes, though, an unclaimed individual and then family will come along later and say, oh, well, since you've cared for them already, I'll take them, because it depends on where you're at if they do a cremation or a burial. Sometimes they choose just burial because that's reversible. You can always, disinter the person and the family can then go bury somewhere else or cremate or whatever. Cremation's pretty final. So, but it's the least expensive option is to do a cremation. So, it's easy if they're storing the cremated remains, then the family can always get them later, but they may have to pay then a fee to get them out of wherever they are. So some cemeteries will give like a niche or like a mausoleum space where they will just stack cremated remains inside, and it's just unclaimed, no specific name, or they may put names. I think the one cemetery tour I did here in Michigan, I think they have names on the outside of the crypts that they put the unclaimed cremated remains in. So the person has a space, they have their name on somewhere, it's all donated, it's all at no cost, but easily if that family comes along, they can go in, they can take out that set of cremated remains and give them to the family. I'm sure they're probably going to charge to go in and do a, removal of the plate and whatever, but they're cared for in some way, the best way that we can, but it is increasing definitely, because it's easier to leave somebody and have somebody else pay for it than it is to sometimes pay for it and go into debt or, go through that process of fighting with a family and trying to get something out of them, because some families are just not going to do it. Even if they have $10, they don't want to give you $10. So it's sometimes just a battle, but there's at least now processes in place that hopefully help that situation. So,
Nice.
yeah. Do you have any bonus questions written down you just are dying to ask? No pun intended, I guess, with it. Sorry.
Have you ever been requested to have somebody laid out for a viewing with their eyes open?
No. I think that question's been thrown at me on the video or on the, on the channel. And I know that with like the extreme embalming, they'll do an eye open type thing, but I don't know if their eye is really open or if it's an illusion. Like I can't tell from pictures if that person's, or if they've like put something in cosmetically or put a cap to make it look like their eyes open, because it doesn't look quite realistic. Like the eye's almost too big. It wouldn't be good. The eye dehydrates really quickly. The eye color changes very quickly. They will fade down to blue a lot. So like your eyes would be oftentimes blue within, a day of dying, but your eyeball just dehydrates down. It's just part of the process. So having the eye open, I don't know how. I would have to really think or talk to, kind of brainstorm with a bunch of other embalmers how I would keep the eye filled and preserved to actually look like an eye. I would have to probably paint it with, I would say, fingernail polish to make it like shiny like an eye is. Like there's things I could probably do, but you would have to get the eye dried out enough that you would be able to glue the eyelid in place to where you wanted it. Yeah, I would have to really think about how to do that. And if it was legal, there would be probably a lot of paperwork to sign. There's a lot of requests that it's not that we can't do it, but if somebody walked in the funeral home and went into a visitation and the person's eyes were open, they could maybe come back and go, I was so traumatized by that situation and nobody warned me, nobody whatever. So whether you put a sign out, whether you, those logistics, unfortunately, you have to think about if it's different than the norm, will somebody be offended, upset, and can they sue me? And somebody asked me in my thing, have I ever been sued? But it's not, but you have to think that way nowadays, which is terrible. But if you did something like that, what are going to be, you know, the ramifications after? And you have to get ahead of those just to make sure, because if you walked into a visitation and the eyes are like open, oh, good God, you know, that's going to freak a lot of people out. So yeah, that's an interesting.
Well,
Now
I asked because
I don't know
my
how to do
grandfather.
that. You did
My
it? You
grand.
asked?
I asked that question because my grandfather had requested to be buried with his eyes open. He wanted to face death like he did life with his eyes open. And this was in 1995, and he was very good friends with his funeral director and embalmer for 30 years. I'm sure he'd gotten a full rundown of why that's probably not ideal.
Yeah,
And, you know, of course, my grandmother wasn't going to sue. I mean, they were friends, and everybody
right.
was aware that this was, you know, what he wanted. And it wasn't weird for anybody there. It was just like, oh,
So his eyes were open?
open in the casket. And, you know, they were hazed over. You could definitely tell that, you know, he wasn't alive, but it wasn't as weird as you'd think.
Yeah.
And then at that very last moment when, you know, everybody was ushered out of the room except for my grandmother and my father and myself. My grandmother went up to the casket and took her fingers and just closed his eyes and said, "Good night, my prince." And I closed the lid. It's actually one of my best memories of them both.
Wow. Now, was he embalmed?
He was, and he was also in a hospital when he died, and
Okay.
the doctor was in attendance at the moment he died. And of course, you know, the embalmer was his friend and lived nearby, so I'm sure it was probably this perfect storm of, you know,
Yeah.
preservation and contacting and 50 years of experience. And
Yeah. So is that embalmer still alive?
no, unfortunately, he
Dang.
passed away a good
I'm
10,
like, I'm going to
15 years.
call him today and ask him what he did. I'd be interested because keeping the eyelids pliable to be able to pull them down after and keeping them open.
Sure.
I feel like there's all these logistics that I'm totally asking the group of embalmers I am in on Facebook. I'm totally asking this question today, how they would do it, because I think it's really fascinating. Um, but we get a lot of strange, crazy questions, and people, you know, they're honest and they're true questions, but things that people want done or saved or whatever. And it's like, I don't know how I could do that. Somebody asked me the other day if they could save the person's head, not while we were meeting with the family. This is like a in anticipation.
Yeah.
Like, can we save the person's head so I can have the skull to keep at home? I don't know. It's some tradition of something or other, like a warrior. I don't know. But, and I said, well, and then the rest would be cremated. And I said, well, who is removing the head? That's the question. I said, it's not even whether, you know, it's legal. I'm like, who is removing the head? Because that's really where we need to start. Because for an embalmer, that's desecration of a human remains. Like we can't do that. That's not okay. So I'm not cutting off somebody's head. So if you want to tell me who's coming in to do it, then maybe we can go to step 2. But we have to figure out step 1 and then go from there. I said, maybe you could get a legal, like a judge could give a something order that says, yes, you may remove the head of this person and give it to the family. But who wants to take home a head? I don't know, somebody, I guess, but I don't, yeah. But these questions come up, and I'm not offended by them or think that they're irrational, but it's the how. It's the
Yeah.
how do you want this? Like, part that you got to wonder about. Like, if somebody wants a mold made of, I don't know, private areas or something like that, which gets asked, how is that going to happen? You know, male body parts don't work the same way as they did in life. It's not really easy to press into clay to get a mold. It's not as easy as it seems and logical, but people ask, and it exists. You know, there's cremated remain dildos. I hate to throw that out there, but that you put the cremated remains in, that way you're close to your significant other. Like, these are things that are out there and people purchase, you know? So you never.
What was that first person thinking when they said, hey, you know what I'm going to do today?
That's the thing. You just never know. Like, the industry keeps changing. And so you just kind of roll with it. And I think just when you think you've heard the best question or the last or the, everything, then a new one comes along. Somebody recently at a funeral home was asked if we could procure sperm so we could do a DNA test, on the baby and stuff. And I'm like, how do you want us to get that out? Like, we could, if it was still viable, because there is a certain period of time you can still get sperm out of a deceased. You would have to go in to retrieve it. Like, we would need a doctor or a reproductive specialist or something to do it, but it's only viable for 36 hours or something that we could get. I don't know. We looked it up because we were like, could we even do this? I'm like, instead of getting whoa, let's just figure it out and let's look and see if it's even a possibility. Like, I'm all for anything if it's a possibility and it's legal and we can do this without hurting the deceased and following the laws and stuff. So it's all crazy. Yeah, it gets crazy.
So there's probably nothing at all that surprises you anymore that a family might ask.
I might have an initial quick shock and go, whoa, that's a new one. But then I start thinking, kind of like the eyeballs. Now I'm thinking about it. It's like a challenge. And I love challenge. I've said this 100 times. I love challenges and I like to see if I can accomplish something or if I can do something or if, we can make something happen. And sadly, my girls are the same way now. They like challenges. It's just, can you achieve something? And I think it's built into all of us. It's not so much the win, because it's not like I win something, but you can get to a certain point. If there's a finish line, I think it makes everybody more ambitious and makes you want to do something. And that's what it is kind of just a new challenge, a new ambition, a new something to try and accomplish. And it's fun to try and do that, I think.
Oh yeah, you can't grow unless you're challenged.
Exactly.
Stay in the same stagnant spot.
Exactly. You're never in the same spot. You're traversing everywhere. Have you been to every state?
Oh, well, I've never been to Alaska or Hawaii, but I've been all the 48 in the U.S. and several places around Canada.
Okay.
After a while, it just blends together. I mean, I couldn't tell you where I woke up yesterday morning.
That's crazy. How often are you on the road?
Oh, I'm home about 3 or 4 days a month. So,
Wow.
300 to 320 days a year, I'm on the road, going wherever.
I'm surprised how many truck drivers listen and comment on my videos, and they tell me, oh, I was driving through wherever, and I was driving through wherever. My father-in-law was a driver for years and years and years, and it's a certain personality. My neighbors are actually truck drivers too. A certain personality, like, I would be so bored out in my mind, I couldn't even do it. But my father-in-law just loved it. He misses it. He just loves going and, he kind of drove the same route for who he drove for and had his truck stops with his waitresses and his things. And he looked forward to all of those kind of interactions and getting to do what he did. And so I have a huge appreciation for truck drivers and what you guys do. So especially right now, you're essential. So that's, you're driving the toilet paper and the hand sanitizer.
Oh yeah. People are glad to see us when we show up. Oh, you got toilet paper? That's great. I don't care when your appointment is. Get in the door.
Bring me the goods.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I appreciate you and thank you for asking questions. I'm so happy to kind of put a face to the comments and the emails that we've exchanged and everything. It's really awesome.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. It's been very educational.
Yeah. And when I get down to Alabama, I'll see if you're in town that we can meet up for some coffee or something.
There you go. Sounds great.
Awesome. Well, thanks guys, and join us for our next viewer question session. Bye.